So I'm going to just start at the top, and if anybody has any questions, um, you can just pretty much interrupt me. So the first question I have is, are there any plans for procedurally generated maps? Um, I can say from the design side, right now we do not have anything tangibly planned in that regard. It's something we've talked about in the past. There's a fair amount of randomness in terms of the prototypes, which we change the interiors of buildings every time we go into them. Is something new we're working on right now. And obviously, the targets in the levels change every time you go through them. But at this time, we don't have anything in the pipeline for that, but that could very well be something we add after we have some kind of campaign structure in place. The next question, are there plans to add any multi-story structures? At this time, no. Partially because with multi-story structures comes additional complexity in terms of what's happening on the second and third stories of the buildings. But most importantly, because we are in a fixed 2D isometric world, if we start adding stories onto buildings, all we start doing is obscuring streets behind them. So right now we've got the art style that we have lets you see everything pretty much without any kind of encumbrance. If we started to build like 2 and 3 story structures, that would not be the case. There's also a matter of the target areas that we're sort of developing these operations around are all pretty much single story buildings with very few exceptions. And part of that has something to do with also the scale of the force that you have in the game. Because you have only 4, and we're talking about having some levels where you might have 8 dudes, but really 8 guys taking on a 3-story structure is not really doable. Not without tremendous risk, tremendous unnecessary risk, I should say. In fact, we're going in the opposite direction to a certain extent. In the newest iterations of the game that we're trying, we actually have a system that allows you to try to flush the target from the building so you never have to go inside, which is truly optimal, because really with 4 guys going into an unknown house, anything bigger than a couple of rooms is. We also have another mechanic we're working on right now, which is a H-bed, which essentially when you go into the house, you get a check every enemy turn to see if the house goes up. Like they try to clack off the house. So there's a bunch of reasons why we don't want you to go into the structures, because in reality you don't want to go into the structures. But that's all stuff we're modeling for hopefully the future, the next major release. Okay. Are there plans to add local forces into the mix, i.e. police force, in the area that may clash with insurgents or Cold Harbor teams? At this time, no. All of that stuff would be outside the operational area. Any police that you would encounter inside an operations area would be considered collaborators with the jihadists. So yeah, kill everything. Okay. I never listened to the previous QA, so forgive me if these have been addressed. Okay, well, no, I can't honestly remember if they were. And yes, I just drank a giant cup of coffee before we did this because I was like falling asleep. Got up too early today. Anyways, okay. Are there any plans to keep the game moddable so players can tinker with, add sprites, features, missions, maps? We don't have we don't have a specific plan to do that right now, but there's also not a plan to prevent people from doing that right now. This is an original engine that was developed by Echelon. And I don't know if Altai wants to speak at all further on that, but I don't believe there's no reason to inhibit people from making modifications, but it's not something we're actively trying to enable. And if Altai go ahead and jump in if you have anything to say on that. I see he's unmuted. Okay. Well, interrupt me if I'm going to keep going. Interrupt me if you get your mic working. Any DLC expansion plans at the moment? It's premature to have DLC expansion plans when we haven't even finished the core game. I know that we're targeting between 5 and 7 maps for a finished campaign. that could be played over and over again, and then you could play isolated missions randomly generated every time. So again, same levels, different missions, different locations of enemies, et cetera, et cetera. I'm down the line, assuming there's still interest in the product. Yes, we plan to continue to support it. What are the devs' favorite games currently, barring Black Powder Red Earth, of course? I was playing Sekiro until very recently, and we play a good amount of Battlefield 4. We were playing more Battlefield 4 a couple weeks ago, but we're pretty busy right now. I'm not sure what the other guys are playing. I'm actually playing Gun Griffin. If you guys follow on the board, I broke out my Saturn and I've been playing a bunch of Saturn games again. Again, can't necessarily speak for the other guys. Let's see, what else have we got here? What engine is the game using at the moment? It's a custom engine. I don't think we actually have a name for it, to be honest. Marat 1.0. But it's a custom engine that we developed specifically to suit our kind of gameplay. I know we had a bunch of starts with different middleware options, and we weren't able to get the results that made us happy until we basically built something ourselves. Next question. How is the iOS version coming along? I don't have a PC at this moment. The iOS version is temporarily paused while we get the desktop version more stabilized. The iOS version was fully playable, and in fact, last I checked, is still fully playable. We just haven't been incorporating all of the new changes, some of the new lighting stuff we're trying to get working. Basically, what we put out so far is I don't want to say totally bare bones, but it's a thin slice, and there was a bunch of stuff we still wanted to do before we go to, like, say, even early access. The game is pretty stable on desktop right now. It was pretty stable on iOS last time I played it. In fact, I don't think I remember the last time I had a crash on the iPad version, so it's pretty solid. If devs of a currently existing game approached the BPRA team about doing a nice big Cold Harbor DLC for their game, which game would you like to try doing that with, and why? That's an interesting question. I mean, I'd be more excited about a mod team coming with us and maybe working with us on what we're doing, because for those of you who don't know, we actually started as an FPS game years ago, and we've changed quite a bit since then. But there's definitely a lot of unique ideas we had for the FPS space that we would love to try. I mean, my favorite kinds of games are actually isometric action/strategy games and first-person shooters. So because we're not working on a first-person shooter, I'd love to do something with some kind of first-person shooter team at some point. Whether it's internal or somebody else's, we'll figure that out when we get to it. Next question. How do you see yourselves in the next 5 years? Hopefully making a living on Black Powder Red Earth, continuing to produce content in that universe, and potentially having a second franchise we can make content for. The main thing with our company and what we're trying to do is diversify and create a lot of different entry points into what we do. So tabletop gaming, video games, graphic novels, animated miniseries. I mean, sort of the sky's the limit to an extent. We'd actually even discussed at one point with one of the Japanese groups that follow us. We had an idea for an airsoft game that would be different than traditional airsoft, but really, there's no way to do that right now in a way that would be profitable, because it was a rather ambitious design. And to be perfectly frank, only one or two of the people here even mess around with airsoft. So next question. What's the market like, given how niche everything you create is? The market is in fact niche, yes. The market is pretty hardcore. We've definitely seen a lot more new people coming to check out a couple of times this year. After we ran the ad on Ben Shapiro's show, and more recently when we premiered the alpha, we've seen quite a few new people check out what we're doing. I mean, that's just a function of us doing what I said before, which is we're trying to diversify and offer a lot of different ways for people to get into what we're doing. It is niche, but it's a niche that seems to get popular every couple of years, and we might be due for that with the new Call of Duty Modern Warfare. Like somebody's finally making a Modern Warfare shooter again, like on a mass scale. So who knows? I mean, could we be doing better? Yes. Are we really happy with how well we're doing? Absolutely. We have a really loyal community. We try to make stuff that everyone wants, and we've been pretty consistently good about that. Like the sticker pack's a great example. For months, people were badgering us to make a sticker pack, and we did. And we can't. We've sold out far more than I ever thought we would sell of these things, and we're still going. So, yeah, I mean, it's niche, but it's like it seems like we seem to keep hitting like everything that niche wants. So hopefully that's good. Favorite drinks? This is a must. I know we drink a lot of coffee at Echelon. uh, I think for Echelon Design Team Ember, which is the creative unit here, we drink a lot of called a nitro coffee. So it's like it's almost like the consistency of a Guinness. It's really nice and smooth. It's super highly caffeinated, or actually it doesn't have any sugar. So, but that kind of replaced Monster. We used to drink a ton of Monster. There's a picture back on our MySpace days. We actually had a picture of where we had a literal tower of cans of Monster that we had drank. That was something like it's pretty insane. Biggest oh shit moment involving Black Powder Red Art, slips ups and big mistakes. Well, I'll tell you the biggest oh shit moment I've had with Black Powder Red Earth. Most of the oh shit moments I've had have all been like tragedies that are not like revolving around mistakes. Like you make mistakes, that's not like. I mean, it is what it is, right? You learn from keep moving. We've had a real weird streak of like people who've worked with us over the years dying, and there's a lot of oh shit when you work, and then they're just not there anymore. We had one of our partners die of cancer. We had a couple people who were longtime friends of our group and had consulted with us for years, killed in action or killed under circumstances overseas that were never fully explained. So really, those are the moments. Those are the oh shit moments. They're like a good reminder to be like, hey, keep going, because at any moment, like everything could just be gone. So we all really want to do this. We all really are passionate about this. So it's a reminder sometimes, like if you're ever feeling bad because you're at a roadblock, it's like, hey man, that guy's dead. We're not. Keep going. So I mean, I don't know if that's exactly what this person was asking, but that's pretty much how I think when I think of an oh shit moment. Next question. Have you refused any deals from AAA game development studios? No, not at this time. I mean, we've had a couple of conversations over the past with larger studios, but ultimately, we don't really chase that anymore. We were looking at that for a long time, but ultimately, I think we want to have enough control over what we're doing to make it distinct before we would go after an arrangement like that. Like, I mean, as somebody mentioned earlier, the question about how niche we are, that niche is what makes us special, right? And we want to hold on to that as long as we can. So if we do have to make a decision about changing something or modifying it in some regard, it's our choice. It's not being forced upon us. Okay. I hope that's a good answer. Did YouTuber Reticulon impress you enough with Spawn Splatter to consider getting him to do something more official? His animations are neat, and he did a great job with it. Yeah, no, Reticulon movie. I talked to him a couple of times on Facebook prior, and I mean, he's just doing his thing. You know, I offered him some assistance on stuff, and if he needed anything, but he seems to be pretty good. I don't know if he's doing any other BPREP. I mean, obviously the whole studio really liked what he did, and we weren't alone. That video has, I think, like in the neighborhood of 20,000 views on it right now. So clearly it definitely hit the right notes with a lot of people who are interested in this kind of content. Okay, next question. Any plans for hardcore modes that limit or restrict certain aspects of the card's perks you receive. The game by default is pretty much in hardcore mode. I'm not sure how much more punishing we would make it. um, as a side note, when this game was designed, or as it's been designed, a lot of the way it feels in terms of the rolls and the odds really is we do a pass on it, and then I invite people over to play it with this kind of background. So they'll play a game and say, hey, that felt right, or that felt wrong, or I really enjoyed this, or I thought this was kind of like bunk. So we've really made an effort to keep it quasi realistic, if you will. I mean, it's definitely not 100% real, right? Because it's a tabletop board game or a video game, right? That you can't make a full simulation of reality. There's just really no way to do it. So you try to make decisions that make it as real as possible without making it clunky for the sake of trying to make it more real. It's kind of like a pet peeve of mine, and I was talking about this on our. I was actually talking about it, I think, in a Discord thread the other day, or maybe it was on Instagram with somebody. One of the things that's got me going back to play Gungriffin is that it was a really good mix of kind of a time attack shooter, but with just enough realism and like weight and mass to it that it had a unique feel, especially when it came out in '96. That no other mech games, even Armored Core, really got right. But I mean, that's just one of those like old school games that I love. I mean, it's probably one of the more influential games. I think other than Marathon or Doom, it might have been one of the first FPSs I played, and I enjoyed it significantly more than like Doom or Marathon because of the setting and the story and all that other good. Anyways, next question. Will there be a dank, old school NES style cutscenes like those of old school Mega Man and Ninja Gaiden? There are no plans for cutscenes right now. We have little animated segments that are part of the opening introduction, which you've seen clips of in the trailers, but the game presently does not have it doesn't have like a story in the regards of like, Bob, I'm going to get Fred. We're going to go smoke, this dude over here, we're going to go kill this guy. You don't have like the general, like in Metal Gear Solid, giving you orders. Okay, next one. What experience are you most grateful for? And I had actually asked that for more clarification on that question when we'd gotten it. What was the most grateful experience? What are we most grateful for? I think it's for me, I've been really grateful to be able to not just meet and work with a lot of the guys who do this kind of work, but to be able to help enable some of their missions and in real life. I mean, a lot of what you guys are playing is a translation of something we developed, or I should say, I kind of co-developed with Travis Haley when I was still at Haley Strategic, called Decentralized Battle Space, and that pretty much has driven a lot of the game design and the narrative and all the things we've been working on over these past few years. So I can say right now that I'm most happy with the current version of the game that we're currently playing compared to the 4 other games we essentially made before this. The FPS, the Facebook game. We had tried another action game at one point. I'd done an earlier board game that it was okay, but this is so much stronger what we're doing now than anything we did before. It certainly has a lot more of the flavor of how you would run a training program, i.e., hey, we're going to this facility and we're going to change up the facility. So even though you may know the terrain, which is realistic because you would have the satellite photography and you'd have all that imagery and reconnaissance before you went in, but you're still not totally aware of what's happening inside the structures. And, you are limiting your risk to your force as much as possible while attempting to accomplish this mission. Okay. Next question. Are there any additional I read that wrong. Are there any additional mission parameters or types planned for the game? Yes. There are 2 other game modes that we are testing right now. There's actually a branching game mode for the game. The game type that we have now is what we call raid. There's a branching game type for raid that has a frago after you complete the first target, that we have prototyped and we have play tested on the tabletop version of the game, but we haven't implemented the video game yet. We have 2 other modes to the game that we have been testing, and those are, let's see what we've got here. Those new modes, tentatively, one is called Exfil, where you have to go into the map, and instead of having an unknown place where you're trying to reach, you have a known asset that you have to reach, and there's variables whether he's in what building he's at, whether he's inside or outside, and there's an opportunity, there's a roll that happens when you finally get in touch with him, whether he can betray you and try to clack off an S-Vest and call a bunch of jihadists to attempt to like destroy your force before you can exit the map. That's a pretty cool map. It's a pretty cool mode. And then the other mode we're doing, basically you start in a compromised state somewhere on the map. Your forces spawn at a random location. Multiple groups of enemy forces spawn, and you basically are given an objective of getting from point wherever you're starting to another point on the map to exfil the map, essentially. That is a pretty frenetic and hilariously fun version of the game. We've play tested that. We have actually 2 or 3 new maps. We're working on 2 that are on table right now. I'm pretty happy with both of those. We've probably got another week or 2 of testing before we start making rough digital versions, and hopefully we'll have them playable by, say, like New York Comic Con timeframe is my goal. Next question: is there multiplayer? Not right now. Multiplayer would have to be outside of the lore to make it fun, because so one of the biggest challenges with multiplayer when you're doing a special operations like commando style game, one of the core parts of a commando raid is that you have surprise, right? All of the technology, all of this cool stuff, everything revolves around having surprise. That's how you can launch with like a very small force and have an asymmetric effect on the target. You can't do that in multiplayer. Like, it's just not possible, right? Like, you're basically throwing a bunch of skins on top of what's essentially paintball, right? Like, everybody knows where the other guys are, essentially. We're all in this, 100 square meter area. We all have guns, and we're all trying to kill each other or trying to accomplish an objective. So there is an idea for a multi-part game, kind of like if you remember Enemy Territory, the Wolfenstein one. There's Enemy Territory is my favorite multiplayer game I've ever played, in terms of how it played, just the gameplay, not the minute to minute gunplay, but the gameplay was like, the overall strategic movement was really good. And we have an idea for something like that, but it's going to come much later, and I don't think it would really come in a turn-based format. I don't know how a turn-based multiplayer game would be in terms of like fun. I don't see how that would be really. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. For the PvE, next question. For the PvE tabletop game rules, are there any plans to create a starter set with Spectre? There are not concrete plans to do something with we want to do something with Spectre. Spectre wants to do something with us. We're still not entirely sure what it's going to be. Whether it's going to be a board game version, which would basically be us boxing up what everyone who participated in the board game beta a couple of years ago, like the extended version of that, which we're currently testing now. We could potentially box that up and offer that to them, and they could use their miniatures, and we would have, like, say, the Hypernotes, perhaps an expanded version of our Hypernotes with like stats in the back, maybe might be one way to do that. But there's nothing concrete there, but there's an interest from both parties to do something. Next question: after Series 4 in the game, what do you see as the future of the franchise? Cold Harbor taking on FSB. That's a great question. I don't know. I'm not thinking that far ahead. I mean, when we started work on this game, it was supposed to be set in the Syria story, and then it was in the Yemen story, and now it's in the Al-Bari story. So things change quite a bit. And like, we're working on the animated series right now. We have the scripts approved by Netflix, but we've been having some challenges about finding people to work on this piece, specifically ever since our character designer died, we haven't been able to replace him yet. So yeah, I don't know what's going on. I mean, the Albari setting could last for quite some time. I mean, I like to think about things like my other favorite game, for if you somehow missed it, is the Warhammer stuff, and that's, they basically have 2 or 3 different settings that they set most of their things in. I would see Albari being one of our principal locations for many years to come. And I mean, we have a lot of ideas of things we can do to expand gameplay and storytelling within that setting. So no Russians, maybe Chinese, but no, the Russians, you just shoot their planes down. They never make it into the theater. I've seen B Period take the form of 3 different video game concepts so far. The original mercenary FPS on Mars concept, the Facebook RPG, which I put way too many hours into when I should have been working, and this newest strategy iteration. What knowledge have you acquired from the previous iterations are you applying to this game? Any lessons on funding, scope, feature creep, timetables, or were they so wildly different in concept you can't compare them? Well, we learned a lot of things. From the FPS to going to Facebook was we just didn't have the resources to make an FPS. The scale of FPS games right when we came out with our concept was where you could maybe make something with like 4 or 5 people to like, I mean, to really be competitive at this point, you need a pretty big team to make like an FPS that would be like a, something of the scope that we're talking about with BPRE, right? Which is these urban firefights and things like that. What we learned from the Facebook game was that while people liked the world a lot, the gameplay was ultimately not that satisfying to them. They wanted to actually control units. They wanted to physically manipulate them. And I mean, the Reticulon video kind of says a lot to me in that there's like 20,000 views on it in like 2 weeks. People want that kind of stylized FPS or stylized action game. And they're like the biggest lessons we have. Yes, scope, absolutely scope. Make something, build it in pieces, make sure it's really good, and add on to it as needed. I mean, there's a lot we've learned about designing AI. I use that term loosely, but there's a lot we've learned about designing things like AI and making deeper behaviors for the NPCs to respond to the players. I mean, like those are the big ones. Like depth. What I mean, I don't know. I think my biggest thing is like what makes games like this interesting is the depth of the opponents you fight, not having a bunch of different things you can do. I mean, it's a very different approach than say like the Call of Duty approach where you have like 50 weapons. I mean, I'm just making that up, and you have 50 mods for each weapon, so you have all of this variation that you can play around with to make whatever your best system is for multiplayer. But to me, a lot of that variation is kind of like meaningless, because when I play games against people who are good in like Battlefield, for example, everybody's got one of like 3 or 4 guns. Like everybody's using basically the same weapons because those are the good weapons. Those are the weapons that make sense in a given situation. Everybody's got like the shotgun or the automatic Glock pistol for their sidearm. Everybody's got like an 8, I forget what they're called, the Ace, the AUG, the HK416, and one of the AK guns. And that's pretty much what everybody carries. Guys with machine, but really at this point, almost everybody carries like that one of those weapons because they're the best overall mix of response to any given number of situations. And BPRE is, I mean, that's part of why there's like unit customization in BPRE, because these guys would have already picked all that stuff out. Maybe that kind of goes against the grain of what people want to do today, but it certainly doesn't go against the grain of what we're trying to design. So, I mean, limiting that, like saying, hey, we're going to limit these things because we're not going to let players make bad decisions about certain things is like, there's 2 reasons for that, right? Like there's the reason to keep it real, and then there's the reason to limit the scope of what we have to build. So, and balance, right? Like, I mean, et cetera, et cetera. Can you imagine like a guy who's like, I'm just going to equip all my guys with saws and send them out to like wreck everyone? I mean, you could do that, but like, how long would they last? It's not really role playing at that point. Okay, last question that I have. I know the current strategy game is meant to be a stripped down, bare bones type of experience. I described it to a coworker as an acoustic performance. But if you suddenly had a Scrooge McDuck swimming pool of money, tons of time, and lots of assets, code monkeys, I don't think our programmers would appreciate that. How large would you make it? If time and money were not limiting factors, would there be large scale strategic element or economy system? How would your dream be purely strategy game? I mean, to be honest, the only thing I would do is just keep beefing up the graphics. I'm really happy with this game system. Um, and the next step for it would be: could we make it real time? Could we make it 3D so you could rotate the maps, and then have multi-structure buildings that are not obscuring what's happening in the street? And then finally, eventually, the final goal is to have it be some kind of first-person experience, like down the line, maybe. But really, I don't even know if that's a requirement anymore, because I don't know if we can really compete in that space. Like, I don't know if that's something that people really want. Like, I mean, maybe if there's a dearth of other games like this at a certain point, but I'm pretty sure most people who want a modern conflict first-person shooter will be playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare. I mean, I pre-ordered it the other day, so I have a feeling that's what people are going to play. And for me, like, at the range that you're dealing with in a game like, which is about the range we're dealing with, most of our maps, like the maps I'm looking at right now, are we have one that's about 50 square meters, and the other one we're working is 75 meters by 50 meters. The one that's in the game right now is actually 75 by 25 meters scale of. So, with that in mind, because we're dealing with night vision, right? There's only like so many different, what's the right word? There's only so many different games like that, and Call of Duty really's got its handling down. Like, it's really nice. At least the new one looks like it'll be really nice. I mean, I haven't played Call of Duty in a few years, to be honest, but even Battlefield's got a really good, like, sort of sense of motion and space that I'm not sure how we would improve upon it at this time. I mean, because those teams are like 200-300 people. I mean, we're five guys, and for us to be able to approach something like that, I mean, maybe there's like an opportunity, like the way DayZ came about or some of these other games came about, for us to do something down the line. But until that happens, I don't really see us doing anything that will be at that scale. So I guess, yeah, if bottomless, if we had like bottomless wealth to make stuff with, I mean, it'd be nice, right? We don't pay ourselves a ton of money to do this. It'd be great. I'd love to be able to pay myself enough, that, like, I can live comfortably and just keep doing this kind of work. But I mean, right now we do other work too, to make sure that we can pay our bills and keep the company going and keep making this stuff. And it's a journey, right? It's a long process. You don't get successful overnight. You don't get rich making video games. Certainly not right away. And I mean, who knows how? I honestly don't have a good sense of how big the market is necessarily for a game like this. I just know I want to play it, and nobody else really has anything like it. So, well, that was 40 minutes. Jesus Christ. So I have got a boogie in like 10 minutes. I know that we recorded this. We did record this session, so we'll be posting it on the Patreon. Does anybody have any other questions that weren't addressed in this session that I can answer in, say, the next couple minutes?
Good morning. This is Whiskey from Malaysia. Quick question. Setting wise, is BPRE going to move out of the Middle East, or are we going to move into C at any point? I'll say this as a C person, despite sounding really Texan.
The answer is BPRE Albari is in North Africa, so we are technically outside of the Middle East. But we kind of go where we've done research about stuff and where we experience things. So right now, that keeps us pretty much in that sort of Persian Gulf area of the world, rather than going to Central Asia or Southeast Asia. I mean, is there a possibility at some point? I mean, yes, maybe, but like it would require so much research on my part before I would be comfortable with like trying to write a scenario like that. Uh, I don't see it happening anytime soon.
I kind of figured that would be the case, but homeboy hopes. All right, thanks.
Yeah, no worries, man. No worries. I mean, I will say that there is a lot of the rules we've got going right now. Just through trying to get values to feel better, like to feel right. We've certainly come up with some game systems that would allow for a more asymmetric game, and I could definitely see us doing some kind of like urban sprawl, future space mech suit warfare thing at some point. But
Mm,
again, it's not imminent. We're really focusing on this right now.
definitely. I mean, it's like got to work on the core competency. Something that occurred to me, just a thought that occurred to me. You talked just now about how you balance how in the game we're not doing any customization because
Mm-hmm.
we're balancing things and all that. It's like a thought that occurred to me. A great way to present that is like saying it's already balanced for the meta. Everybody's already running the meta, so you don't need to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of what the Hypernotes presents, right? Like for the
Yeah.
people who are really into it, the Hypernotes kind of spells out what everybody's using and exactly why they've got that setup given the mission that they have.
Yeah. I mean, I'll be honest. If no graphic novels came out, but just the hypernotes, I would just be happy with that.
Yeah. Well, the Hypernotes is the focus, and we've got probably at least the way Josh is going on it. I mean, and the amount of content we still have to do. I mean, we're looking at best case December before we're done with it. I mean, there's a lot to go. I mean, we have to do. I mean, if you look at the table of contents, like Josh is working on the vehicle stuff now. We're doing the pistol renderings, and then we dive into the host nation forces, the neighboring nation, the opponent in the host nation, the opponent supporting faction, successful operations by those opponents, and then we have the opward, which is an actual sample mission like laid out in military format at a tactical level, which we're pretty much talking with Josh. I think we're gonna do that in a graphic novel style format at the end of the Hypernotes. So you'll get like 60 pages or 80 pages of Hypernotes, and then there'll be probably 40 to 60 pages of like the opward rendered out in graphical format, so you can see how this would actually.
It's 6:40 a.m. in Malaysia, and those words woke me up faster than coffee could. Thank you.
Wow.
That was amazing.
Cool beans, man.
It's also recalibrated my accent, so now I actually sound my normal accent instead of Texan.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't sound Texan, man.
Yeah, I know. It was. I was last in Texas 25 years ago, so yeah. A long story, a really long story.
Okay, guys. Do I have any other questions? Last chance.
I actually have one here. Sorry, I just realized my microphone was still muted.
Yeah.
So, yeah, hey up. Fan from UK here. I was actually going to ask about how the anime is coming along for Netflix, if I can call it that. But you already kind of answered that for me. So, I didn't know about what happened with the character artist, honestly. I must have missed that because I do keep up with you on Instagram.
Yeah, he died. He died abruptly in May.
Oh, so only like a couple of months ago. Jeez.
Well. So here's the problem with the I mean, we've kind of learned a lot about the anime industry since we started working with our producer over there, which his name is Jesus Christ, totally spacing out right now.
I was actually just looking him up, actually, believe it or not, and that name slipped my mind as well.
Yeah, Kaneko, Atsuji Kaneko is our producer, and he was the guy who wrote Gunsmith Cats. He the animated series. Yeah, I mean, he's got a long history in the industry. So our character artist was Akihiko Takadera, who was Katsuhiro Otomo's sort of like number 2 when they were doing the Akira manga and doing the Akira film. So like a lot of the work in Akira was Takadera's work, approved by Otomo. So Takadera's work, like his graphic novels, his manga, they're not available in English, but we picked them up in Japanese. And like, I mean, his storytelling and his design was just right for us. So we met him. I met him back in January with Josh, and Mr. Kaneko introduced us. And he was super excited to work on the project. He was really into the kind of stuff. And then he developed severe arthritis, which, you know, arthritis, you would think, okay, it's something you can get over, right? Like, it's not the end of the world. But then he died, like literally within 4 weeks of him saying his arthritis was getting bad, and he was going to need like a couple of weeks to recover. He died 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later.
Oh, no.
Yeah, like he was like 57 years old. I mean, he was a young guy. He just died.
Holy shit.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, it was pretty bad. So where we're at now is we actually have a greenlit script from Netflix. We have to translate that. We've been holding off basically on doing all the future movement though, like translating the script, starting on the storyboards, until we get a new character designer though, because even if we were able to move forward with all those other things, if we don't have a lead character designer in place, we don't have a show. So we've got two guys we were working with, and it's been slow going. You know, one of the guys sent designs over. They were good, but they were too heroic. If that makes any sense, they're like too Western.
Yeah, I sort of get that, having dabbled in character design myself.
So where we're at now, the problem is, so we're waiting on these guys to try to do new renderings, which we haven't seen. And the other issue we've encountered is after that fire in Kyoto where the guy burned the anime studio and killed everyone there. Japanese studios are becoming super risk averse about new content that they would take on. So we're in a little bit of a point where Gainax was actually signed up to do the animation for us for this project, which was super exciting. But they backed out of the project after the fire because they're concerned that some other crazy person would show up at their offices and kill everyone.
Oh God.
So I'm taking they're treating they're treating every newcomer like this.
Excuse me?
Sorry, you're saying that they're treating sort of everyone like this, given the events that's been going on?
Yes. Yeah. Right. I mean, Gainax was just acquired by a whole other company, which is why they're actually even in business right now, because the guy who created Evangelion had sued them for like $200 million in unpaid royalties, and won apparently. So yeah, they were really up shit's creek. Apparently, some company came in and acquired them, paid off the debts or negotiated, however that worked out, and they were on board to work on the BPRE animation. We had met with them in January when we were over there, but yeah, I mean, like, that changed. Like, that studio, that guy going and killing everyone in that studio really sort of like freaked everybody out in the industry, because that's the first time that's ever happened. I mean, that was like the whole studio was literally wiped out. There's nobody left alive from that place. You know, and that wasn't like a violent extremist. That was just some guy who was really upset that that studio featured his favorite train station in Violet Evergarden, and then tourists started showing up there, and he got really angry, so he torched the building while everybody was inside.
Bloody hell.
Yeah, I mean, he almost died himself. He literally locked himself in the building and set it on fire.
Jesus. I knew it had something to do with like, he claimed that the studio took some of his ideas. Is that what it was? And it was actually to do with some of they'd already got and made?
Yes.
Jeez, okay. That's interesting. One other thing as well, as someone who's also who's actually sort of, I've been sort of trying to closely follow, but I've yet to even grab a copy of your graphic novel, because it's not easy getting them imported over here, and I'm poor, and I'm trying to fix that. Don't worry. Well,
wait a minute. It should be on Amazon UK.
Really?
Yeah. We're published. So in America, we're published by Amazon, and you can actually buy our books in Europe, I believe on Amazon Co. UK, and in Canada on Amazon. I think it's CA. We're not available in Japan or Australia, but the European Amazons, I believe, carry our stuff.
Okay, right. I didn't know. So I'll rectify that soon. Don't worry. But I was going to say, as someone looking into doing something like a military IP myself, more science towards 3D games, probably in similar direction to you guys. I've like noted. Am I correct in assuming that a lot of the details come from your research on like the structures of US SOCOM structures? If I'm correct.
Initially, early on, yes. Now, no. Now,
Okay.
now it's like literally we work with the people who actually are at those different sort of like select ends of the spectrum, and they basically work with us to make it make sense or work with the reality. So the Hypernotes is me literally sitting down with a guy and working with him for like over the course of a month to like build out what the mission is and then work backwards from what the mission is and determine what the force you need to accomplish it is. What would be the infrastructure you need to accomplish it? How would you sustain that operation? We never really did that deep of a dive before, to be honest. We just kind of like went with like how things were set up and never bothered to explain it all. The Obari series is literally like a soup to nuts. If you were going to try to do this operation, these kind of operations in a nation like what we're talking about here, in an environment like we're talking about here, this is what you would have. This is what you would bring to the table.
Okay, fair enough. So, so it sounds like I don't have to do like as much research as I feared I would have to do for this sort of thing. But no, okay, no, that's really interesting to hear. And yeah, I keep forgetting you got some interesting connections as well.
Yeah.
Which of course have been a great help, and it shows from the details that I'm just about to look into the Hypernotes for. So
yeah. Well, yeah, the Hypernotes is, rather than trying to copy an existing structure, what the path we're choosing now that we have this game, the sort of like you know more tangible thing. It's not just a narrative happening. It is to, rather than mirror what's being done, to optimize towards how it should be set up, if that makes any sense.
yeah, yeah, I'm getting the hang of it. Yeah.
Yep. So, I mean, doing a ton of research is super helpful. I mean, the whole reason I was able to get in the door with so much of this stuff is because I was so well read on the actual conflicts at the time, which, I mean, that was a time and place in history where like I happened to know the right guy, and I happened to, and like I knew what he was doing, which drove me down a bunch of research in one direction. So when I met this next guy, I was able to talk to him in a way that was more, that was like I understood what his mission was. I mean, that's part of how Haley Strategic got some of the special operations contracts we had, is we knew what the mission was going to be, so we could tailor our special projects training group to specifically address those needs when nobody else really had an answer to those problems. You know, the Jack Carbine video is a good example of it. The Jack Carbine video isn't actually an ad for a carbine; it's an ad for a military unit.
Interesting. Okay.
So, you know, yeah, there's a lot of subtle stuff that you won't pick up on unless you're part of the organization or you work in that world. But there's a lot of things in the Jack Carbine video that set HSP up for our first big military customers.
Interesting. Yeah, because I've been like I mean, as you said, the research has been super helpful, and I have I mean, hell, I've even like dabbled my Patreon money into like some very interesting groups who've also been giving me some. Well, I've also been reading up on their conversations, and that's been quite helpful in what I'm wanting to do as well.
I'm sorry, you dropped out there.
I did. I knew it. I thought like, hold on, something's off here now. But yeah. Oh god, what was it I said now?
Something about you were in other Patreon groups and that you were dabbling with their conversations, and I lost you.
Yeah, that was it. It was I was just saying how that's been super helpful in what I'm looking into doing as well. Not just with like the details and such, but with how I'm going to be tackling my own project as well.
Oh, cool. Well, good luck, man.
All right, cheers, pal.
I'm probably going to use the Hypernotes when they come out as a sort of like a base building block. I mean, not the Hypernotes directly, but the way they're laid out. Because on certain forums that I am, every now and then some young creative mind has this idea for a world building thing, and then it all kind of falls apart because they keep forgetting about the logistics and the thought that goes into this stuff. So I'll probably use the Hypernotes as an example of what to do, heavily redacted, of course, or more like summarized.
Or modified for whatever you're trying to build, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I mean, there's a reason we have LPVOs and aim points, because they use the same batteries.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like that's part of how we selected what's in the specific systems that we're using. Though actually, it's funny. I just remembered we went from T2s to Comp M5s because the Army went with Comp M. which is actually a different battery now that I think. God damn it.
Yeah, it's a regular
Double A,
battery
isn't
now,
it?
isn't it? Just
It's a
it makes it
AAA.
easier to import them.
Yeah, or they're already there. They're already there. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
anyways, okay, guys, it's about 1900 here, so I need to bail out because I got to go to the gym. Everybody, take care of your bodies. Does anybody have any last questions before I book you here?
Nope, not from my
Okay.
end.
No, just cheers for having this Q&A. That's about
Okay.
it.
Well, cool.
Very much, yes. Cheers.
Man, I'm not sure if I came in a little bit late for the Q&A. Apologies for that. But know that you're talking. I know that one of my Q&A questions was a future of the series after Series 4. Can you repeat that? I'm sorry, guys. I was late to the Q&A.
Yeah. The short version is we don't know. We're gonna be in Obari for some time to come because Obari as a nation state has a lot of different things you can do in it. And as a conflict, it's got a lot of different things we can model if we want to keep modeling different things. A good way to think about this is like Warhammer has like the Horus Heresy, and then they have the Dark Imperium. And this is the same kind of thing, right? Like this is our Dark Imperium, or our Necromunda, or whatever you want to, whatever sub event they have. There's a tremendous amount of stuff to explore within this, and we've spent a tremendous amount of time building it. So I think for the foreseeable future, most of the stuff we do will be based in Obari.
All right, then. Awesome. That sounds great.
Okay, cool. Okay, guys,
All right.
I'm going to break off, guys. So thank you for everyone who came out. We are going to be archiving this on the Patreon, so you can listen to it later if you missed any part of it. And hopefully all that coffee didn't make me talk at 200 million miles per hour like I normally do. So I will let you guys go. Thank you very much for everyone who came by. Goodbye.
All right, cheers.
Awesome.